Welcome everyone to this session. This is called Farming in the School Grounds. We're going to have a woodland focus, and you'll see that we're actually in a beautiful woodland right now on Browning Farm. I'm going to introduce our host, John, very quickly, and then he'll be joining us again in just a moment. So thank you, John, for having us.
Yes, thank you, Jo. Just a quick one. Can everyone see my head? It looks to me like it's been cropped off.
No, yeah, no, you're okay.
Put your hand up if you can see my head. Yeah, great, wonderful. That's a great start. So my name is John Nichols, and I'm very pleased that Jo chose to do her broadcast from the farm today. This is Browning's farm in we're just outside the parish of Kirkford in West Sussex. So our closest town really is Billingshurst, and we do 4 main activities at the farm. We have a woodland, and we use some of the wood for timber products, including timber framing. We grow fruit. We have fruit trees here. We have cattle, and we use the farm as a host farm for educational visits. At the moment, really targeted at school groups, but there are plans to ambitiously expand much more into running training courses and getting into a little bit more in depth into ecology and survey techniques.
We'll come back to you in a moment if that's all right.
Yep, sure. See you in a bit.
Thank you. Okay, so we're here in this beautiful woodland. I don't know if you can hear the birds, they're singing away, surrounded by gorgeous bluebells, and we're here to talk about why farming and the woodland are just amazing resources for children to learn in. So this evening has been funded by the South Downs National Park, and thanks to them, we've been able to offer it for free. We also have a resource that I will be sending to you via email, which looks at basically everything we're going to talk about this evening, so that you don't have to make thousands and thousands of notes. So that will come through tomorrow, along with an evaluation form, on an online evaluation form. So if you wouldn't mind giving us some feedback, that would be fantastic. So just a couple of things to talk to you about the South Downs. We're obviously in the South Downs today, not right up on the Downs, it would be a little bit blowy, but actually within a beautiful woodland in a really lovely valley. And the South Downs are, part of their work is very much about education. They have a Learning Outside the Classroom manifesto. They talk very much about the benefits of learning outside the classroom for both pupils and staff. They are really keen for children and teachers to be aware of new environments and perspectives, really keen for children to be exposed to nature and to provide hands-on learning opportunities. And the South Downs National Park Education Team are very good at supporting organisations and schools to make that happen. They have an education network, and if you look on their website, they have a fantastic interactive map where you can explore what is available close to your school, but also resources that are available for other schools that perhaps don't want to go out but still want to do that outdoor learning. So we've got food and farming, wildlife and habitats, human history, art and literature, cultural heritage, health and well-being, adventurous activities, and residential trips when they're allowed again. So all of those are covered very nicely and very carefully on the South Downs National Park Authority's website. There's big links on there, and I will be sending you through some contact details for the local contacts for those of you within the South Downs National Park. They also have a transport bursary, which many schools do benefit from using. So if you are travelling into the South Downs, or you're a school within the South Downs making a visit outdoors, then do get in touch with them, because it may be that you are eligible for some financial support, which is always, I know, very welcome. So, aims of today's session, we are looking at how food is produced and grown on the farm. We are looking at how farming needs to be managed carefully to support a sustainable environment. And also the idea is today to inspire you to use food and farming production in your teaching, and specifically looking at woodland spaces, hence our beautiful location today. So John's already told us a little bit about Browning's farm. There is a lovely website which has lots of details about the work that John and his father do. So do have a look at that as well. That will be in the resource that I'm sending through. And if I just asked John a little bit more to give us a bit more detail about the education work you do here, that would be fantastic. Thanks, John. So what sort
Hello,
of typical visit for children coming to the farm? What would they do?
Yes. Well, today, in fact, was a typical visit. We had a lovely group from Three Bridges Primary School, Key Stage 2 they were, and one of the sort of happy outcomes of the pandemic is they now come in small groups of 10, but we can cope with 30. And today we just ran through a typical lesson plan. So it was a brief introduction to the farm and then a small farm walk, but primarily to look at habitats and discuss how a local farm like this produces food and to talk about the supply chain and how it ends up in their plates.
Fantastic. And how does the woodland feature within food production on the farm?
The woodland features, well, kind of indirectly, but let's just talk about the livestock first. So we have cattle here, and they spend most of the year outdoors. They are a single suckler system, which means the mother will bring up its calf, and they will be in the fields all year round, other than from Christmas to April. So they will really use the woodland as shelter. They won't actually go into the woods, but most of the fields are surrounded by overhanging trees, and on a stormy day, we'll find them gathered under. Another way that we use the woodland indirectly for food production is that, as I mentioned earlier, we do grow the fruit trees here, and they all need a tree guard around to protect from the livestock and deer and rabbits. Now, we have 240 trees, and each tree has 6 posts and 6 rails. So that is well over 1,000 elements that have gone into the tree guards. All these tree guards came out of the wood, all out of dead wood. And it's a rather nice kind of sort of example of recycling, I guess, where we're taking timber to help the growth of new trees.
And the trees that you've planted, is that a sort of a wildlife corridor idea around the farm?
Yes, definitely. Yes, the trees that we have planted do create a wildlife corridor from one woodland to another. So they are, in fact, a traditional orchard. And hopefully, if anyone is able to visit, we will do a walk through the corridor and just demonstrate exactly what we're trying to achieve.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for John at all?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he's going far away though, so. No, not yet. Okay, perhaps later.
Yeah,
Thanks.
feel free to ask questions
Yeah,
later.
I do,
Yeah.
definitely.
Thanks.
Thanks, John. Okay, so that's where we are. We're at Browning's farm. It's rather lovely, and any excuse to come back, basically. So my role is I'm an education consultant for LEAF Education. LEAF is linking environment and farming, and as an organisation, we're very much about sustainable farming. So it's very much about making sure that we are producing food, we're looking after the countryside, and we're supporting our farmers in making decisions which are going to ensure a sustainable environment. And many of you will be aware of Leaf Mark, which is a fantastic scheme rewarding those farmers that meet certain criteria so that their food and the produce that they're making can be branded with the Leaf Mark and therefore show to the world how brilliant they are and what a great job they're doing in looking after our environment. So within my role as an education consultant, I work very much with farmers and schools across the Southeast region, helping them to basically make connections, producing resources, supporting farm visits, supporting schools with projects, supporting farmers with training, but also being there and just being somebody who knows what they're talking about if anyone has a question. So for our LEAF Education members, like John, it means that we're there if you need any sort of support. So one of the reasons why farming and the countryside are so very important is, of course, that it benefits the children. We are very much aware at the moment of the importance of well-being, and I have to say it is rather lovely being stood in this woods this evening. There are often problems for teachers in getting their children out of the classroom, lots of logistical reasons, but often it's very difficult to convince the senior leadership team that the extra work, the paperwork, the cost, etc., is worthwhile. Thankfully, and not unsurprisingly at all, there are lots of research out there that actually supports the need for children to visit and be outside and outdoors. And there's a fantastic resource which I'm going to give you a link to on the presentation you'll be sent later, which has been put together by the School Farms Network. Brilliant book, and it's effectively a resource pack, and the idea is to support those schools that want to get their children out, get them muddy basically. So what does it say? It says, for many young learners, it is not sufficient to acquire knowledge without seeing its relevance to themselves and the world around them. Young people learn better through practical experience and acquire knowledge and understanding through real life tasks that stimulate their natural curiosity. In this way, knowledge, skills, and understanding take on a deeper meaning and help to raise achievement. And at a time when we're concerned about the well-being of our children and the importance of actually helping them to realise their position within society and to understand that everything's going to be okay, getting those children outdoors and appreciating what's going on outside of the home is a fantastic idea. So this is a great resource, and I will be referring back to it a couple of times. So going forward, the Learning Outside the Classroom Manifesto was a government resource, and again, something to help you convince those senior leadership team members that you can get those children out. The value of learning outside the classroom has been recognised by the Department of Education with the publication of the Learning Outside the Classroom Manifesto, which opens with the following statement. We believe that every young person should experience the world beyond the classroom as an essential part of learning and personal development, whatever their age, ability, or circumstance. And I understand for many schools it's really difficult to get those children out and about because of the costs and the logistics and the staffing issues. And of course, that's why Leaf Education is here to support and help that happen. So, why do we get them out? We get them out because we want them to learn, we want them to experience, we want them to enjoy their day, enjoy their learning experience. For many teachers, it has to be about the national curriculum. There has to be links to the key core subjects that they are having to tick those boxes. So there's a great resource which looks at all of the different links available for getting those children out and linking back to the national curriculum. So for example, if we were going to look at geography, we could consider observing and recording what's going on outside, using our fieldwork skills, which is something that John was mentioning earlier, something that they support the learning of here, recognising changes in the environment. So we have a beautiful moat here, an ancient moat in the woodland. Why is that here? What is the history behind that? What is that part of? What's the bigger picture? A fantastic opportunity to get children considering the wider landscape that they live in, but also get their imaginations going, linking with history, linking with English. What can we do with that moat? Who would have lived in this area hundreds of years ago? Why is that moat here? So to actually come and see it is just fantastic. The discussions and the conversations that you have with children just stood next to a moat in the middle of a woodland is just wonderful. We can think about ICT. How can we use technology when we're on a farm? Well, farming is changing considerably. I'm just at the process of putting resources together, looking at hashtag Techie Thursday, part of a farming fortnight program, which is taking place next month. And in that, I've looked very closely at what's going on within agriculture and the new technologies. So most children are aware of drones, but how does that tie in with farming? Is it the fact that tractors can now be driven by remote control? The fact that we are picking fruit with robotic hands? The fact that we are using little tiny tractors to grow our food rather than massive great combine harvesters. The small robot company is a great company that's producing these really interesting smaller versions of the traditional tractor. And those are helping farmers to rethink how they farm, and fantastically inviting for children and even the little ones. Who doesn't like getting up into a tractor? Designing technology. Why are the wheels so big? Why does the farmer have to be so high up? Why are all these lights on there? What does this stick do? What does that do? What is he pulling? What is he doing? Why is he doing that? So many conversations that can happen within a farming environment to get those children thinking about ICT, designing technology, and how it actually works within the real world, rather than just looking at it on a worksheet or on the screen. So lots and lots of opportunities. When we're looking at farming, we tend to break it down into small chunks. And I've broken it down into 4 for this afternoon. The first one is looking at plants, so arable crops, fruit, vegetable, trees, etc. The second is thinking about livestock. We've got cattle here on the farm today. The third element then is looking at conservation. What is the farmer doing to help the environment, to sustain this responsibility, this great big responsibility that they have, this great chunk of land that we want to be just as beautiful in 200 years' time. And when I'm writing resources for my own students, I often ask them the question, what would a farmer do? Farmers are well known for having the ability to mend anything with a bit of baler twine. They are fantastic at recycling. So what would a farmer do is often a really great question when children are facing any sort of problem-solving activity. And in fact, talking about problem-solving activities, there are amazing activities on a resource called the Countryside Classroom. It's a portal. It's a website managed by Leaf Education and its partner organisations. And if you were to put in there farming, wood, trees, you would come up with thousands and thousands of different resources that have been produced by experts for teachers to use within their teaching completely free. Lots and lots of opportunities on there to type in woodlands and to come up with identity guides, facts and figures and sheets and suggestions of different activities that you could be doing with your students. So a really good opportunity for you to use resources that are already out there so you don't have to make your own. In fact, one of the resources that I'm particularly keen on is one which is a poster set, Science on the Farm. And one of the ones which ties in beautifully for where we are today is one which focuses very much on soil. And one of the things that we like to do on the farm is to actually count the number of worms within the soil. John, have you ever done this with your students?
No, I haven't. Hello again. You just called me out there.
Sorry.
I haven't, but I am dying to.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely desperate to. So there's a lot of research lately that demonstrates the more soil, the more worms in the soil, the higher the yield. Now, really, that kind of thing is aimed at arable farms. But in terms of what we do here, more soil, higher crop production. And what I'm dying to do is compare the amount of worms in the soil in a woodland with the grass pasture.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, and really hands-on for the children. They get really dirty, get in there, and they're counting those worms. And some of them don't like holding them, but by the end of the session, they're all completely into it.
Well, yeah, no, we do find that. At the beginning of the session, they don't like holding them. Really, what we've done so far is just look at litter feeders. But like I said, next time they come, we're going to get a bit deeper in the ground.
Fantastic. And are you going to dig the holes for them, or are you going to let them?
I'm trying to source some robust children's space.
Brilliant.
But otherwise, I'm afraid that for now, I will be demonstrating.
Fair enough. And have you ever thought about getting the children to do a rain dance to help the worms to come to the surface?
I haven't, and I haven't seen any evidence that actually works.
Yeah, it definitely does work, and the children love it because, of course, the worms think it's raining, so they start to come to the surface. And yeah, it's great fun getting the children jumping up and down into raindrops to encourage those worms. So yeah.
Okay, I'll bear that in
mind. Okay, so when we're looking at soil, obviously counting worms is great fun and a really good way of teaching the children their life cycles of different animals, but also the food chain, because of course worms are a very important part of the food chain. And that's a really interesting subject for you to cover within a woodland setting. We can look at how the fallen debris from the trees creates those important sources of food, those animals which are creating that nutritious soil, which then of course can grow the trees. And a great activity for children to do in a woodland setting is actually to go around collecting seeds, assuming they haven't all been eaten, getting them to actually move around the woodland, finding those acorns and considering the size of that acorn in comparison to that completely mature oak tree is a huge, great learning curve for children. And often looking at the difference between softwoods and hardwoods and why some trees grow faster and some trees grow slower. Measuring trees is a fantastic activity, something that can be done very informally with children holding hands around those larger trees to measure how many children that tree is worth, as it were, how big it is compared to the smaller ones. And I'm actually stood at the moment right next to a hazel, which is a fantastic opportunity for the children to discover. I don't know if it's going to scan nicely. Hang on a second, we might be pushing my my skills here a little too far. Hang on a sec. There's John. So we've got a hazel here. Okay, and John was talking about the importance of using the trees within the woodland on the farm, but of course hazel was planted very often for as a crop, and you can see that these ones haven't been harvested in a little while, but they do make fantastic resources for the children to use with any sort of activity because they're just so very bendy. So these would be great if we were doing any sort of weaving activity with the children. And they are just there, just waiting to be used, which is just fantastic. Right, let's move you back. Okay, so when you're on the farm with the students and you're in the woodland, the different sorts of things that you can do then really are going to make a difference to the quality, as it were, of that visit. And of course, when anyone makes a visit, the first thing they think about is what is the aim of the visit? What is it that we are trying to achieve? Why are we going? Why am I doing all of this paperwork? Why am I doing all of this extra planning? What are my aims? And the aims may be curriculum linked. They may be much softer than that. It may be more about getting the children out and doing some sort of team building activity. It may be about getting those children who perhaps need a little bit more exposure to what's going on in the real world, those with very narrow home lives. So it can be a huge range of different focuses. If it's a curriculum linked focus, we've already talked about the different elements that we can cover on a farm. And you'll see on the resource that you're going to be sent through how many different activities you can actually link to what we're calling the woodland classroom. Listening to these beautiful birds right now, one of those activities could most certainly be just the sound map. So the children sitting quietly, and for many children that's really difficult, but actually just sitting quietly and listening to where the birds are located. That for some children is a really difficult activity, something that they will struggle with. So if you can get them sitting on the ground, listening quietly and pointing to where the birds are, that gets them to really appreciate what's going on around them, particularly if you start comparing that to the sounds that they would hear if they were at school or at home, and listening to the natural sounds in comparison to the man-made sounds. So at the moment, it's pretty much natural sounds where we are. There's a little hum of traffic, but it's incredibly far away. You have to really struggle. I can't hear the wind turbine. Can you hear it? Okay, there's a wind turbine on, I can't hear it. Oh yeah, just about. Goodness me, yeah, you have to sit really quietly. Fantastic. So getting those children to actually think about what's going on around them, think about the birds, where they are, can they identify how many different bird calls there are? And the RSPB makes some wonderful fluffy bird toys that actually, when you hold them, when you squeeze them, make the sound of those birds. So it's a great activity for getting the children to learn the different bird sounds, because they're really quite difficult to identify if you're not a total expert. But it's a great way of getting the children to really, really listen and to sit and be quiet and be still. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? No, everyone's just nodding at me quite quietly like they're happy.
I've got a question, Jo, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm based in Wales, in mid Wales, and we are going through a new curriculum change now. So our whole Welsh curriculum is completely changing. So all staff, all teachers, all support staff are just having their training on the new curriculum. In the resource pack that you have, do I assume that that is based on the English curriculum, or would you have a counterpart that kind of looks at the Welsh curriculum?
I have a wonderful colleague in Wales who you may have come across, Bethan Simmons, who is
okay, yeah, I have, yeah.
So she lives in Wales. She's a Welsh speaker, and she is an expert in all things Welsh. The resource that I'm sending out is pretty generic, to be honest with you, so it would probably transfer quite nicely. Because what I have found actually that teachers are the experts at knowing what the children need to know. They just don't often have the time to make those links between the learning objective and the resource of the farm. So the resource that I'm sending you is much more about sort of increasing awareness of the opportunities really on the farm and in the woodland and the things that could be done.
Yeah, well, the fantastic thing about the new Welsh curriculum is they have a whole section on health and well-being, which has never been in a curriculum before. It's always been linked to something else, but it's actually, you know, has its place rightly as a curriculum measure itself. So that's where it's really good.
Yeah, no, that would be amazing, and it would tie so beautifully with farming, because you can look at food miles and local produce. You can look at, I mean, woodlands. If you've heard of forest bathing, I'm not sure if that's reached Wales yet, but forest bathing is this wonderful approach to basically just well-being within a woodland and being quiet and being still and appreciating what's going on within a woodland. And I went on a lovely afternoon with this forest bathing expert.
I thought you were going to say you went to Japan.
No, yeah. More expensive. And we spent the afternoon in a woodland, and this person was just talking about imagining the branches are above you, but also the network that's going on underneath you as well. So looking at the roots of the trees and how effectively the trees are a complete circle, and how you are in the middle of that, and how you are part of, almost like the trees are hugging you, to be honest with you. When we were looking at all of the different minute details on the tree. So instead of sort of seeing the tree as this huge, great entity, you know, this huge, great living organic being, you were looking at the surfaces, the rough and the smooth. You were looking at the shapes that the branches were making. You were looking at the soil and sort of looking at the levels within the soil, but also thinking about the little white the roots that were coming off the soil. So it was really sort of investigating the tree as in minute detail, rather than just it being a tree, and the feel of the leaves and how that tree made you feel compared to that tree, because some of the trees are very tiny and some of them are actually massive, and lying on the floor and looking up into the branches and all the different colours and the patterns and the music that the trees were listening to. We didn't get on to having a stethoscope and listening to the water going up the trees, which I know some people have done, which is quite good fun. But it was a really interesting experience of actually just being within a woodland. And when you're looking at well-being, that for children is just fantastic. You know, they come into this sort of area and they're engaging all of their senses, particularly in a noisy wood like this one.
Yes.
Yeah, they really are having to take a back seat and just soak it all up, which is just wonderful.
You want to say something? Yeah. So, Donna, lovely to hear someone from Wales. Well, whereabouts are you?
Right in the middle. So we're about an 2 and a bit hours from Cardiff.
Okay.
And about 2 hours from North Wales as well. So we're bang in the middle.
Are you near Machynlleth?
Yes, so we're about an hour from Machynlleth.
Great, because Wales, without knowing it, has got a lot to answer for about what we do at the farm here. Many years ago, I met a friend on a farm in Australia, and he and his wife have spent quite a few years working at CAT in Machynlleth. For alternative technology, and I visited them both there about 20 years ago, and that really triggered something in my imagination, and partly by accident and partly deliberately, we've managed to set up quite a few renewable energy schemes here at the farm, which ties in very well with our kind of holistic approach to farming, and that's kind of become much more relevant now than it was 20 years ago, and it was important then.
So you mentioned you've got a wind turbine. What else have you got here on the farm in terms of conservation?
In terms of renewables? In terms of renewables, we have PV solar, photovoltaic solar, and the wind turbine. The buildings, we try to design them so they kind of have a passive solar design about them, which basically means they take advantage of the south sun. And that's it, really. Yeah, okay.
All right. Thank you. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
thanks, John. Yeah. Okay. So, any other questions? No, everyone else is quiet. All right, thanks, Jono. If you have any more questions, then do say. That's great. So I was going to talk a little bit about how you can use the farm as a whole, and we talked about the different elements on the farm and looking at plant growing, not trees just for a moment, but plants, thinking about arable crops, fruit and vegetables, and that side of it. There are lots of organisations out there who have fantastic support available to help schools, and some of those are listed on this resource. So, for example, the Royal Horticultural Society are linked with Countryside Classroom, as are all of the ones I'm going to mention. And they have put together some really lovely resources to help those teachers who aren't particularly confident in growing on the school grounds. So it's great for children to grow food and to then produce dishes with it, produce meals with it. And so they're actually really seeing that field to fork experience or allotment to lunchbox experience for themselves. But for many teachers, that's actually really scary. And I kind of get that. So luckily, the Royal Horticultural Society have put together some great, really easy to access how to grow cards, basically. So looking at seasonality, looking at what grows well within a school ground, and therefore really making it easier if you're that teacher that's been tasked with setting up a growing session and just think, oh my goodness, where am I going to start? So those resources are available, and as I say, beautifully free. There's also the National Fruit Show, and they have an education officer who has produced fantastic resources looking at apples in particular. She runs workshops, and she'll go into schools and actually bring an apple tree with her so the children can take that learning forward. And you're looking then at the fruit, but also the benefits of eating that fruit. So the difference between eating a raw apple compared to an apple juice. And she'll help the children learn about sugar and measuring sugar. She'll talk to the children about storing the apples and how they're grown. She'll talk to them about pollination, etc., etc. So that is a fantastic resource for those children who are looking at growing people on a lower level, maybe a key stage 1 level. We ran a virtual visit with her during lockdown, where she was in the orchard, and we did it all via Teams, and it was wonderful. So these children had this fantastic view of an orchard, and we're getting into the orchard. They have some fantastic 360 technology to really get the children to appreciate the seasons as they're moving through the orchards, the apple orchard. So those resources are there. You've also
Sorry,
got...
Jo.
Yeah.
Jo, sorry. What was that lady's name? Where was she from?
So you need to go to the National Fruit Show.
National Fruit Show.
Yeah, it's called Apple World. It's not a theme park, but it's very apple. And they're fantastic. So the National Fruit Show basically funds an education officer at that. She is an expert at all things apple, so she'd be very supportive. And as I say, really good at the moment of doing virtual visits from the orchard in Kent. So yeah, definitely worth contacting. And many of you will have heard of Grow Your Own Potatoes, which is an initiative which has been running for many, many years. Huge, great initiative. It's become incredibly popular. And they basically provide everything for schools to grow their own potatoes and take part in a national competition. So a really good, well-supported opportunity for teachers to get those children growing. And of course, most children are aware of chips and crisps. So it's fantastic. And not all areas of the UK grow potatoes commonly. So it's not something that they might see in the field. And it's a great opportunity for those children to actually experience potato growing for themselves. And that moment when they rip open the black bag and all of these potatoes spill across the floor is just fantastic, and a brilliant opportunity to bring some maths in. You know, which is the biggest potato, which is the smallest, let's measure them, do a little bit of research with the science hat on, looking at which plant has grown the best. Was that because it had more water or less water? Was it more in the sunlight? Was it more in the shade? So loads of opportunities there for the children to really consider what has helped those potatoes to grow. So super cheap, and as I say, really well supported. There's also the Food A Fact of Life website, which is just brilliant for those teachers who are interested in getting their children to understand about food and where it comes from. Lots of really lovely recipes on there, which are completely idiot proof. Fantastic videos on there looking at the production of the food. I use them a lot with my business studies, GCSE business studies students, because you can see the actual processing of the food as well. So it isn't just about where it's grown and where we eat it, but there's also the stages in between. So another fantastic resource for those lessons. And a couple just to mention before we go on: Garden Organic, again, how to grow, how to garden. And they keep popping up on my Twitter feed. They've got quite a bit going on at the moment. So if we move on from plants then, and how we can get our children in school growing and actually experiencing the joy of planting something and then it turning into something we can eat, which of course is just wonderful. What about the opportunities to rear livestock on the farm? And I know a couple of you have got chickens already, which is just brilliant. You know, the incubation of eggs, the egg hatching out, keeping hold of those then chickens, and then having the eggs from those chickens is just fantastic. And I think that's brilliant. I've seen where I've been into schools and I've had tours with the children, and they have been so excited to share their chickens with me. So it's a fantastic opportunity for them to learn about what animals need to be healthy and the animals' well-being, also about how to treat animals with respect and how to care for them. So really great if you've got chickens on the farm, on the school. But what about if we wanted to go a little bit bigger? So this is where this resource comes in, this School Farms Network resource. This is just great. So in here, it basically explains how you can feasibly and easily, and the benefits of rearing other livestock. So it isn't just about chickens. It isn't just about, well, I was going to say the pet rat, but I don't think many schools have pet rats anymore. I think they've moved on to geckos and things, haven't we? What this looks at, this resource here, supports how to rear poultry, as in for a sort of on a more commercial level, perhaps, how to have goats, how to have sheep, and how to do it practically. It talks about rearing alpaca, cattle, pigs. It really does look into how to do it properly. I know there are lots of schools across the country who are lucky enough to have the space to do this and have those keen, committed teachers who are happy to put in the extra work that this requires. And they are really, really keen to share that knowledge and those experiences with those schools who perhaps are just starting out. So I would heartily recommend having a look at this booklet. So as I say, it's called Get Your Hands Dirty, and it's produced by the School Farms Network. It's a fantastic opportunity to just think about, you know, how practical would it be? I do have one school who were lucky enough that their local farmer actually took in some sheep and some lambs in a tractor for the day and took them onto the playground. And what it did was it helped those children who perhaps were really nervous of the whole idea of big animals to actually get to grips with that, and they were comfortable, and it was a really, really successful day. And what it's done is it's convinced the senior leadership team now that actually there is a benefit in the children engaging with the local farm, that sheep, the ewe and the lambs, actually, those children were really inspired. They were really talkative. The ones that are normally very quiet were really, really chatty, and the work that was produced after that event was to such a high standard that the senior leadership team said, oh, okay, now I can see that there's a benefit. So it was a really good opportunity to sort of dip the toe in the water. And then next summer, those children will be going to the farm. So that's fantastic. So that's a really pleasing outcome for something which didn't look likely for quite a while. So yeah, definitely. It's all about sort of little steps, I think, for many schools and for many hosts. So livestock farming in your school grounds, as I say, there's this wonderful resource. There's also, you may have thought about having bees on your school grounds. Beekeeping, becoming increasingly popular. The British Beekeepers Association are really keen at the moment and really promoting school beekeeping. They are very happy to train and support schools across the country. They have lots and lots of localized groups who will go into schools and support and train. And they are really, really pushing the next generation of beekeepers. And of course, when we're looking at how important it is to ensure that we have pollinators going forward, and the importance of managing our use of chemicals and pesticides, and how we should be thinking about pollinators when we're planting, it's really key for those children to then be involved in the process of keeping bees. And I've seen some fantastic success stories where schools have introduced beehives, and it's been really, really popular. The school that I teach at, we have 3 beehives. In fact, no, we have 4 beehives now, and they're a group of children who basically care for them, but every single year group is involved in the process of actually collecting it and making the honey. And for business studies students, of course, it's fantastic because they're then seeing that process through and selling the honey on. So, you know, we've got the marketing of it, you know, collecting of it. It's fantastic. So beekeeping is also something that you might consider as a possibility for your students. I'll just take a quick break. Does anyone have any questions? No, you're all quiet. Fantastic, I think. Okay, so we've talked about growing plants in the school grounds. We've talked about livestock farming in the school grounds. What about conservation? So John's talked about the work that he's doing here at the farm. And of course, that translates very nicely across to the school grounds. You can, of course, recycle at school. There's the option of composting and getting the children thinking about food waste. So not only thinking about food miles, but actually what's going out the other end, you know, what food is being wasted, how can you minimize that? And I do know of schools where they have food waste monitors, so they're encouraging the children not to take too much food at lunchtime unless they're actually going to eat it. You also have recycling opportunities, of course, with crisp packets these days, not the children as having crisp in their lunch boxes, so those are opportunities there. And of course, recycling water, particularly if you've got a school allotment. That opportunity to collect that water and actually measure that water makes a fantastic science project as well. Is water increasing or decreasing? What does the water butt look like? How much rainfall have we had? That collecting and analysing of data is particularly hands-on, I would say. So when we're looking at conservation, we might also think about things like hedgehog houses. Do you have hedgehog corridors at your school? Can your hedgehogs get out in and out of your grounds? Do you have appropriate places for them to be safe? How does your groundsman manage the grass? Is it possible to leave the grass a little bit longer so that you've got the daisies and the buttercups for your pollinators? Are there different ways of managing the school grounds to encourage more sustainable or environmentally friendly approaches? It may be that you can put some planting in, maybe have some wildflower areas, perhaps think about making sure that if you're planting trees that they're natural, not natural, of course they're natural, that they are more traditional species rather than ones from abroad. And it may be that you think about considering the areas around the grounds and perhaps in the playing field, about having some sort of areas which are left particularly for wildlife, maybe even a wildlife corridor in your school. Is that possible? Can you help your wildlife move from one end to the other? So just sort of thinking about it more as a farm environment, I suppose, rather than a playing field. And I appreciate that doesn't tie in for every school, but for some schools it could really make a difference to get those children really thinking about bigger picture, as it were, and how their school can help. LEAF, as an organisation linking environment and farming, has criteria that they call the integrated farm management approach, and that's very much about considering different elements of how you manage your farm, which all then work together to produce a sustainable approach. So things like water conservation is on there, things like making sure that you have those wildlife corridors. Can you manage your energy efficiently? Are you always turning off the lights and the computers, or are they on standby? Are you thinking about how you manage your weeds in the school grounds? The small robot company are developing little tiny robots that can actually kill the weeds using laser rather than chemicals. I don't suppose that's appropriate really for a school, but it's a different approach. So, you know, is it all about using chemicals to maintain the weeds, or is there another approach that you might use? Great opportunity to get some pigs in, or some chickens if you've got lots of weeds that need dealing with. So loads and loads of different approaches. And I mentioned earlier about answering the question, what would a farmer do? And getting the children to think about what a farmer does. You know, it's not just about growing food. It's not just about cutting the hedgerows on the side of the road. The fact that the farmer is caring for the countryside and helping it to have a future, as well as feeding the country. but also doing that in a sustainable way. So, what would a farmer do is a great question for those children to think about. Certainly for many of you, careers are certainly something that's going to be involved and included within your planning. And farmers great examples of a diverse, traditional but evolving career. And at Leaf Education, we have a fantastic resource which is also available on Countryside Classroom, which looks at the rural economy and all the different jobs that exist within the rural economy. So going from something like a farmer or a shepherd, but also things like somebody who is discovering new food and designing new products, somebody who's looking at technology and evolving technology within the agricultural sector. So lots of different variety. I realise I've been doing lots of talking again. Does anyone have any questions? No? If you want to unmute and ask a question, that would be great. John, is there anything I haven't said? Oh, is that a question?
Yeah, well,
Hi, Anne.
I don't want to butt in and I don't want to take over everybody, but I'm involved in a project called Raising Aspirations. And it's children in primary school, so year 6 in disadvantaged areas had put forward a need that they're quite often from families that don't have a working parent or a role model within the family who's been working. So we've encouraged local community members to go in and talk to the children about kind of careers and opportunities and raising their aspirations. If we were going to contact Leaf and ask for any farmers or anyone to be involved in kind of that program, would that be something that you would be interested in?
You will find that farmers are rather lovely and very supportive and very keen to share the beautiful countryside that they look after and to encourage that next generation to understand what's going on in the farming community. So yes, farmers in general are really, really helpful. And Bethan will know some lovely farmers near you, I'm sure. Young farmers are really good. In fact, the careers resource that we put together was actually in conjunction with the Young Farmers organisation, because likewise they're very keen to encourage that next generation of farmers. And the diversity of careers within that resource is fantastic. I think off the top of my head there are 40 different careers in there, and it talks about the different skills that they need and that the pathways through and the education that is necessary but not completely vital. And it's really to get that next generation thinking about the fact that you don't have to be born on a farm to work on a farm, to own a farm, to run a farm, to have anything to do with agriculture. You don't actually have to have a farming background. So absolutely that would be something we would certainly be interested in.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Does anyone else have any questions? No? Okay. Is there anything I haven't mentioned that you can't believe I didn't say?
There will be when we turn the camera off, but no, not off the top of my head now. We've covered a lot.
I think so. I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking very fast. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to send across basically the PowerPoint presentation that I've been working off this evening. Got lots of links on there, lots of suggestions. By all means, if there's something on there that really gets you thinking and you want a little bit more support, then do get in touch. Absolutely. We are here to help. And as I say, there'll also be a link on there to an evaluation form. If you wouldn't mind just spending 5 minutes to complete that, that would be fantastic. I'll just check that no one has any questions before we go. No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, folks. This will be uploaded to the South Downs website in a few weeks. I imagine it'll take me that long to edit it, make it tidier. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Have a fantastic afternoon, and hopefully our paths will cross again.